we got a real wake-up call from the president who is imposing very strong tariffs against Canada, as well as his talk about Canada becoming a 51st state. So there is a keen strategic interest in diversifying trade, and there's a natural affiliation, of course, economically, culturally, historically, with the UK.
Now, world leaders are expected to meet for the G7 summit, where it will be held in Alberta in Canada. The agenda will no doubt be dominated by the war, not just between Ukraine and Russia, but the spiralling escalations in the Middle East between Israel and Iran. But Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer is also looking to be locked into talks with his Canadian counterpart, Mark Carney, to restart trading relations and cutting barriers. Well, Joe Oliver is a former finance minister who represented Canada at the G7 and the G20 and joins us now. Joe, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Joe, with the sudden and rapid developments between Israel and Iran, will this be a call for unity between all the members? And will we see less conversation about tariffs and trade agreements and more about world policy?
Well, I think the geopolitical issues will clearly have a high priority, but they won't constitute all of the discussions, because people are there also to confront the tariffs that the President of the United States imposed. They're going to be looking at growth issues, security, stability, trade. But as to whether there will be a consensus on these issues and the geopolitical issues, I don't know. I mean, one of the great unpredictabilities about the event, of course, is the president himself, who attended three meetings of the G7. The fourth was canceled because of COVID, and not a great deal happened because of a lack of consensus at that time. So we just don't know what the president will do. As to consensus on the war between Israel and Iran, I think there are some who have a clear vision about the moral issues involved, and the president and Emmanuel Macron have spoken about their support for Israel against its genocidal terrorist enemy that would like to wipe it off the face of the earth. Others have been a little more equivocal. So I'm not sure. On Ukraine, there again, I think there's a clear moral stance that you'd hope all countries would take. But it's not certain whether they're going to be able to draft something which would result in a communique. It looks like there actually won't be a common communique coming out of this, but rather notes and individual statements. So I guess they've realized in advance that unanimity is going to be difficult to achieve.
Right. But do you think that's what's behind that? Because it is unprecedented in these kind of meetings, G7, G20, to not come out with a communique. Do you think they just decided to nip it in the bud and avoid that awkwardness of not being able to exactly agree on the exact form of words, that people will be looking to the G7 to see what the consensus will be around Gaza, around Ukraine, around Iran, and that's just going to be too difficult to achieve? Do you think that's what's behind this?
Yes, I think that probably is. And recall, I think it was in 2018, the U.S. didn't sign on to the joint agreement. So they don't want to see that kind of, lack of consensus being so publicly displayed. So I think they'd rather avoid that, at least. That's my impression. But a lot of the discussion will relate to the question of tariffs, and each country is trying to cut its own deal with the United States, as well as I think there are quite a few other countries invited who aren't members of the G7. India, South Africa, South Korea have been invited and will be attending. Mohammed bin Salman from Saudi Arabia was invited, but he's not coming. Claudia Sheinbaum from Mexico will be there. And of course, Vladimir Zelensky. So they're all going to be engaged in a variety of bilateral and multilateral talks about geopolitics and about the tariffs and their approach to economic development and free trade. And in that kind of environment, it's going to be hard to create a consensus. Now, I should say that one of the reasons I believe that additional countries have been invited to the G7 is the G7 itself is less important on the global stage economically than it used to be. It was about 70% of global of the global economy, and it's fallen to about 43%. But the U.S. represents about 40% of that, so it's a very important player, and everyone is going to be watching what the president does and talking to him.
Joe, just focusing a little bit on UK and Canada relationships, there is a trade agreement that's been there since 2021, the TCA. Is there scope for improving UK-Canada trade relations? And will we see any talk about that in the G7?
Well, that's a bilateral issue.
Well, will that be happening on the sides, I guess, is what I'm asking.
Oh, I'm convinced it will be, because Canada has a very strong incentive to diversify its trade, which now is about 75% with the United States, and we got a real wake-up call from the president who is imposing very strong tariffs against Canada, as well as his talk about Canada becoming a 51st state. So there is a keen strategic interest in diversifying trade, and there's a natural affiliation, of course, economically, culturally, historically with the UK. So that's being pursued, and I think from the UK perspective as well, they would like to diversify trade, and so there's a natural a natural common interest in that regard. Unfortunately, Canada has failed to develop its natural resources to the point of creating infrastructure to tidewater and being able to help the Europeans in a time of crisis by exporting our vast natural resources, energy resources, particularly natural gas, to the UK and the rest of Europe, and during the conflict with Russia. So we've got a lot of work to do to catch up. But in the meantime, we're trying to enhance our trade relationships with Europe, and particularly with the UK.